Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. One thing we keep hearing from you is like, hey, what's the deal with AI using all this energy, especially all this talk about generative AI, right? Things
Yeah.
like ChatGPT. Well, good news, we hear ya. And today, we're going to dive deep into that.
Yeah.
You sent us over a couple super interesting things to look at. One was this scientific article from Polytechnic Insights, pretty heavy stuff, and then this like list of pros and cons about generative AI.
Right. It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, I guess one of the things that struck me was just how much AI's energy use has become this like major talking point.
Yeah.
And, we think about AI, it seems all kind of abstract, right?
Right.
Like this magical thing. But underneath it all is this massive infrastructure.
Yeah, so it's not just the software, it's like the hardware. It's like the physical stuff that has to run all this AI needs a ton of power.
Exactly, yeah. Data centers, which power AI, are already using an incredible amount of electricity. And it's only going up from there. I mean, by 2026, data centers, along with things like cryptocurrency mining, they could be using as much power as entire countries,
What?
like Sweden or even Germany.
An entire country's worth of electricity? That's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
It makes you think, though. Like, is that really the whole story? Are we even getting, like, the full picture?
That's a great question. And the tricky thing is we don't really know. One of the biggest challenges here is the lack of transparency
Okay.
from these big tech companies.
Yeah.
They're not exactly open books when it comes to reporting how much power their AI systems are using.
Right. So it's kind of like, hey, look at all this cool new AI stuff we're making, but like, let's just not talk about how much energy is being used. Speaking of all that new stuff, I gotta admit, I am pretty fascinated by generative AI, like ChatGPT. It seems so revolutionary.
It is. It is revolutionary.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have to remember that revolution, it comes with an energy price tag.
Mm.
For example, there was this study that showed a Google search powered by something like ChatGPT could use 10 times more energy than regular search.
Wow. 10 times. That's a huge difference. I mean, maybe we shouldn't be using these tools for every little thing then. It sounds like the energy demands would be astronomical.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's another thing to think about. Research from companies like Meta and Google is showing that it's not just the initial training of these AI models that's energy intensive.
Sure.
It's the actual use of those models, what we call inference, that's now using the most energy.
Okay, can you break that down a little bit? What does inference even mean in this context?
Yeah, sure. So think of it this way. You've trained a dog to fetch,
Yeah.
right? So every time you throw that ball and the dog goes and gets it, that's inference. That's putting the training into action. So every time you ask ChatGPT a question, you're engaging in inference.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. So it's not just about building the AI brain, it's about keeping it powered up and running all the time. Which brings me to another point. Like we're talking about energy, but what about the actual impact on the environment?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a crucial point. All this energy use is going to have an impact on the environment. And calculating the exact carbon footprint of AI, well, it's really tough,
Yeah.
but it's definitely significant.
Do we have like any concrete numbers, something to kind of help people wrap their heads around it?
Yeah, that Polytechnic Insights article you sent over, they mentioned a study where they found that training just one AI model emitted as much greenhouse gas as 10 French people do in an entire year.
Wow. 10 people's worth of emissions just for one AI model. That's pretty crazy. I mean, with numbers like that, it kind of makes those claims about, tech giants being carbon neutral. It makes it sound a little I don't know,
Mm,
a little dubious.
yeah, yeah. As that energy consumption continues to climb, claiming carbon neutrality, even with things like carbon offsetting, it becomes harder to defend.
So the big question is, can we have our AI and a healthy planet too? Like is sustainable AI even possible?
I mean, that's the million-dollar question, right? Is it even possible?
Hmm.
And honestly, there's not like a simple answer. There's a lot of obstacles when we talk about sustainable AI. Like
Mhm.
even if we could build like super energy efficient hardware, just the process of actually making all that stuff, it creates emissions.
So it's like we're trying to fix pollution with more pollution.
Kind of, yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's a tricky situation. And then you think about the data centers themselves, right?
Mm.
Huge amounts of water for cooling.
Oh, right, right. I mean, that puts a strain on water resources.
Exactly. So it seems like a solution, but you're kind of just shifting the problem somewhere else.
Yeah.
And even moving these data centers to areas with cleaner energy, like places that use a lot of renewable energy sources like solar and wind, Well, that doesn't solve everything either.
Right. Because you're still increasing the demand.
Exactly. Increasing the demand for energy overall.
Hmm.
And that could lead to building even more power plants that rely on fossil fuels.
So it's almost like even when we try to make AI more sustainable, it can backfire. It's a real catch-22.
Yeah, it really is. And then there's this other thing, what we call the rebound effect. So as we make these AI models more efficient, they become cheaper to use, easier to use.
Okay.
But then people start using them even more.
Oh, so it's kind of like I get a fuel-efficient car and then I start driving it like twice as much because I feel
Yeah.
less guilty.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. That's a great analogy. So yeah, we need the technology to improve, but we also need to be smarter about how we think about using AI. Like, do we really need to be using it for absolutely everything?
Right, right. So you're not saying we should like abandon AI entirely, are you?
Oh, no, 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 not at all. AI has the potential to do some incredible things, right?
Right.
I mean, think about things like healthcare, climate change. We need AI for some of these solutions,
Right.
but we need to be more mindful, right? More thoughtful about how we're developing and using AI. You know, we need to be really aware of those energy costs, the environmental impact, and really focus on the applications that are, truly essential.
So it's kind of like responsible AI development.
Exactly, yeah.
What does that look like though? Like how do we actually make sure we're using AI in a way that actually helps people and doesn't hurt the planet?
I think it starts with asking the right questions before we just jump on the AI bandwagon, right?
Hmm.
Do the benefits outweigh the costs? Are there better ways to do this that are more sustainable? Can we actually design AI systems that are like inherently more energy efficient from the very beginning?
So it's about being more intentional, like really thinking about how we're using AI.
Exactly. It's not just about the technology itself, but how we choose to use it.
Right.
We have to move beyond the hype and really look at those long-term implications. AI isn't just a technological challenge, it's a societal one.
Yeah.
And how we choose to deal with it, well, that's going to shape our future.
That's a powerful way to put it. So where do we go from here? What can people do to be part of the solution? Like what can our listeners do?
It starts with awareness. You know, the more people understand like the energy costs and the environmental impact of AI, the more likely they are to demand change from those companies creating this technology.
And the more they'll think about how they're using those tools themselves, right? Like making
Yeah.
more informed choices.
Exactly, yeah. It's about like giving individuals the power to be part of the solution.
So it's not just on like, the engineers, the scientists. It's everyone's responsibility.
Exactly. It's this big collective challenge, and it needs a collective response. And, part of that response is supporting the research and development of more sustainable AI. Like there's some really interesting stuff happening with energy efficient algorithms.
Yeah.
And data centers that are powered by, renewable energy.
That's good to hear. It sounds like we've covered a lot today. I mean, we talked about those energy hungry data centers, the carbon footprint of all this AI and how tricky it is to make it truly sustainable. Out of all that, what's the like one key takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with?
I think the big one is that AI is this powerful tool, right? I mean, it has enormous potential, but it comes at a cost.
Mm.
And we need to be aware of that cost,
Yeah.
right? Both in terms of energy and the impact on the environment. And we really need to think carefully about how we're using this technology.
It's like that old saying, right? With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, exactly. And that responsibility, it's on all of us. The tech companies, the policymakers, individuals, we got to move beyond all the hype and have these, more critical conversations about what are the long-term implications of all this.
It's been a fascinating conversation, and it's given me a lot to think about.
Me too. It's something we should all be thinking about, talking about.
And speaking of thinking, I wanna leave our listeners with a final thought. Now that we've talked about all this, the energy costs, the environmental impact, how do you feel about using these AI tools? Is it worth it? Like, is convenience worth, maybe sacrificing some sustainability? Just something to think about as we all kind of figure out this whole new world of technology.
Yeah, it's a question we all have to answer for ourselves.
And who knows, maybe this'll inspire you to do some of your own exploring, your own research. That's the cool thing about knowledge, right? It always leads to more questions.
It always does. And we'll be here to help you explore those questions in future deep dives.
Until then, stay curious. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.